Hola amigos! Welcome to chapter 1 of the Warlord Once Forever. Now guys, this is a very lengthy chapter, but I'll go through it as gracefully yet as quickly as possible. And this is basically where two of the main characters meets each other. So here we go. Chapter 1. 5 years ago. Mount of Black Castle, Russia. If the overgrown vampire didn't stop staring at her face, even his wicked talent with his sword wouldn't keep his head upon his shoulders. The thought made Mist, an immortal known as the Coveted One, grin as she curled up in the windowsill of her cell. Leaning against reinforced bars, she watched the two vampire armies battle below as she might rumble from the back of the bleachers. And it would strike again and again The poor warlord with his broad shoulders and jet black hair was about to join a legion of other males, with those last sight on earth was her smiling face. She frowned when she ducked and ran through his enemies. He was a big male, and at least 6.5 feet tall, but he was surprisingly fast. Tilting her head, she studied him. He was good. She knew fighting and she liked his style. Dirty. He'd cut with his sword, then strike with his fist, or duck a parry, then throw an elbow. It amused her to watch. But when she couldn't, give to be done there fighting, in the middle, against both sides, against him. She fought dirtier. His gaze continued to stray to her, and once he'd even killed with his eyes still on her. She'd blown him a kiss, sincerely choosing to see it as a tribute. He found time to glance back, even as he thundered orders and gave command to the army of vampires around him. Showing brilliance in strategy, she examined it all as though watching devious battles on A&E, grudgingly noted the effectiveness of his army, acid grenades and guns. The creature of the lore scorned human weapons like these. The only one such weapons could kill were humans, which was beyond non-sporting. Yet, that was the thing about bullets. Aside from ruining perfectly good couture, they hurt and could immobilize an immortal for precious seconds, long enough for a dirty fighter to take your head. Done enough times, they could help take an untakeable castle. Like Mount of Blanc. Are we? Yeah. They could take an untakeable castle like Ivor the Crows. Mist hardly cared that Ivor, her jailer and tormentor, was about to have his ass handed to him by this warlord with his forbidden modern weapons. Her situation could not have changed, for these rebels turned into humans, known as the Forebearers, were still vampires. A blood foe is a blood foe is a blood foe. An explosion rocked the castle, and sparks and bits of debris wafted down from the roof of Miss Cell. The low creatures of the dark holes down the corridor howled in an impotent fury, increasing in urgency to each successive blast until it was over. Silence. An aftershock here and there, a muted whimper. The fence of the castle was no more, its inhabitants having disappeared by tracing, as the lores called teleporting, leaving no more than an eerie draft and burn records of their horde. She could hear the rebels screaming bowels of this place had could have told them that they wouldn't have found any of their enemies. The dungeons here had not been affected of that sort, more of a who fights and runs away lives to run away another day. Shortly after, she heard heavy boots clicking on the stone floor of the dungeon and knew it was the Warlord. He crossed directly to her cell and stood before it. For her perch, cruel to the window, she examined the vampire up close. He had thick, straight black hair that hung from his face in uneven sections, no doubt from where he had sheared it off with his blade last month and never thought to cut it since. Some hands were kept from his field of vision, with those small revel plates like the berserkers would wear. He had scars on his hands, and his big body was powerful and cut with muscle. She wanted to purr, because apparently Sanctuary Castings had just sent down the consummate virile warlord. Come down from there, show yourself. Deep voiced Russian accent, moneyed, aristocratic. Or what? You locked me away in a dungeon? I met through you. She was at the bars before he had any time to lower his gaze from the window. Had his shattered jaw slackened just the smallest bit? She listened for a quickening of his heart, but found none because there was no heartbeat whatsoever. So the vampire was single? His eyes were clear of his red haze that marked bloodlust, which meant he had never drunk from a being to the death. But then a forebear skewed, taking living blood through the flesh altogether. When he saw her face up close, the key wasn't inevitably in the lock as it usually would have, but his lips parted, exposing his fangs to her. Of course, this would be sexy, not too prominent or even much longer than a human's canines. When she saw the short, splendid scar that passed down both of his lips, lightning struck just outside, but he didn't flinch at the bolt or even glance up. He was too busy staring back at her. Scars, any extroverted evidence of pain, attracted mist. Pain forged strength. Strength begot electricity. This one could give it to her. It was possible he was even missing an arm with that thick hack of hair. She stifled her throat to growl as her hand shot out to brush his hair back. But he was quick. Catching her wrist, she curled one finger in a beckoning gesture, and after a moment he released her, allowing her to reach forward. She brushed his hair back, revealing a hard-planed masculine face, covered with grit and ash from the battle. He was in possession of both his eyes, and they were intense, gun-metal gray. When her hand dropped, his brows frowned together. Perhaps at her blatant interest, or perhaps at her fingers already stroking the bars in envision as she stared at his mouth. She was surprised by how carnal she found it, especially since the vampire could use it to hurt her. The smooth gold chain that she'd worn at her waist for millennia now felt heavy on her. What are you? He asked, his pleasingly voice low. She realized then that his accent wasn't Russian, but from the neighboring STI. The general was Estonian, which made him kind of Nordic Russian, though she was sure he wouldn't appreciate that description. She frowned at his question and pulled back her hair to show him her pointed ear. Nothing. She parted her lips and tapped at her tongue against her smallest dormant fang. No recognition. She frowned at his question and pulled back her hair to show him her pointed ear. Nothing. Apparently the rumors were true. Here was a leader of this army, a general most likely, and he hadn't a clue that she was mortal enemy. He would think she was a fae or nymph. She'd prefer the fae because she'd cringe to be confused with one of those little hookers. She shook her head. As long as he didn't know she was Valkyrie, it worked for her. Killing the unwitting forebears would be easy for her, and her sisters too. Almost like being your own secret Santa. Miss had just confirmed rumors in the lore that whispered of asses and elbows and the whore's inability to differentiate between the two. "What are you?" Nikolai asked, demanding again, surprised his voice was steady. When he'd seen her in the light, he'd found it exhilarating and took a stunned breath. If his kind responded, for she was strikingly lovely, with a beauty only hinted from the distance of the battlefield, he'd been attracted to the face, to his reckless peril. Though she had expected him to recognize her kind, all she could determine was that she wasn't human, and that she didn't have a clue what she might be. Though she had expected him to recognize her kind, all she could determine was she wasn't human, and that she hadn't a clue what she might be. Her ear said fae, but she also had the smallest fangs. "Free me," the creature said. Flawless skin, coral pink lips, flamed red hair. His eyes that flickered over him appraisingly were an impossible green. The way she held the bars was suggestive. Everything about her was suggestive. "Swear fealty to my king, and I will free you." Excuse me. "I can do that. But you've no right to keep me here." His brother Murdoch passed by them, raised his eyebrow of wrath, discovery, and muttered in Estonian, "Sweet Christ." Then he walked on. Why was Roth unable to do the same? "What's your name?" He wasn't used to his question being unanswered. Another stroke of the bars. "What do you want it to be?" He scrawled. "Are you a vampire?" "Not the last time I checked." Her voice was sensual. He couldn't place her accent, but it was drawling, honeyed. "Are you innocent of malice against us?" She waved a dismissive hand. "Oh, good God, no. I love to kill leeches." "Then rot in here." As if she could kill a vampire. She was scarcely over 5 feet tall and delicately built, aside from her generous breasts showcased in her tight shirt. Just before he turned, he saw her eyes narrowed. "I smell smoke," she called after him. Avrodaco burnt his records before he fled, didn't he? Well, still, clenching his fist because he had to return. He did. He grated at the cell once more. And the sneaking army of full forebearers turned humans. "It matters little. I'm sure the king is very knowledgeable about the vampire horde's extensive list of enemies within the lore. He wouldn't need this Castle Manelia's worth of records. In fact, I'm positive that it's not the reason you chose this stronghold over 4 others, including the royal seat." How did she know their agenda so well? Roth could plan battles and sieges. He'd earned his rank by his victory alone, but he knew nothing of this new world to advise the army. Unfortunately, he was alone. The blind leading the blind. When they'd found the records reduced to a smoldering heap of ash, that's what Christoph had muttered. "You think to bargain for your freedom. If you do happen to have information, I can get it from you. Torture? She asked with a laugh. But first piece of information I'll divulge to you would recommend you try not to torture me. I dislike it, and I grow sulky under pincers. It's a fault. The things in the cells, many of which he could have never heard of, never could have envisioned, howled and grunted at that. Now let's not quarrel, vampire. Free me, and we'll go to your room and talk. She offered, fragile-looking hand out to him. A smudge of ash was stuck against her alabaster skin. I don't think so. You'd call for me. You'd be alone in your new quarters and will feel out of sorts. I could tell you pet my name, and I could let you pet my hair until you fell asleep. He drew closer and lowered his voice to ask in all seriousness, You're mad, aren't you? As a hatter, she whispered back conspiratorially. He felt a hint of sympathy for the creature. How long have you been down here? For 4 long, interminable days. He growled at her. Which is why I want you to take me with you. I don't eat much. The dungeon erupted with laughter again. Don't hold your breath. Certainly not like you, forebearer. How do you know what I am? I know everything. And it's true. She had a wealth. He didn't. Leave her, Murdoch called at the gateway of the dungeon. His brows were drawn, no doubt puzzled by his brother's interest. Roth has never pursued women as a human. They'll come to him or gone without. He'd had no time for wartime. As a vampire, he had no such need. Not until he found his bride. He shook his head at the insane fake creature, then forced himself to walk on, though he thought he heard a whimper. Call for me, General, making the hair on the back of his neck stand up. He followed his brother to Christoph's new arch-chamber, and found their king gazing out into the clear night from a generous window. That would be shuttered in a few hours till dawn. Then he turned to them. His gaunt face looked weary. Roth suspected it had been difficult killing other natural-born vampires, his own kindred, no matter how crazy they had become, and no matter that they found his uncle the minstrel, who'd stolen his crown centuries ago. Roth had no such compunctions. He was weary, but only from injury, and his own sword arm being overworked as he hacked through them. Were any of the records salvageable? He asked, with little hope. If the vampires in the castle had spent much energy fighting and burning, they might have kept her black. To his disgust, they'd fled. He didn't understand it. When defeating your home, he defended to the death. He had, Chris had answered, none. Without the records, their own ignorance would kill them. Christoph, the rightful king, had been raised by humans from the minstrel's reach. For centuries, he had lived among them, hidden his true nature, yet learning little of the lore. His army consisted of human warriors. He turned as they died on the battlefield, so they knew nothing. Before Roth had seen Christoph standing over him like an angel of death, offering eternal life for eternal fealty, Roth had thought vampires were a myth. The rules of this new world were complex and often counterintuitive. The Order knew little than conjectures and what had been learned by painful trial over the centuries. They were trapped in a kind of twilight, not human, yet universally shunned by the factions of the lore. Those beings, hid in the shadows, fleeing from whatever kind of Christian's army occupied, worked together to always be one step ahead. Roth's human experience said they should have been able to get information by now, but the reality was that this was a different plane altogether. The same effort went into hiding the lore from humans for ages, went into keeping Christoph soldiers in the dark as well. Any signs of Conrad Sebastian? Christoph asked. Worth shook his head. He hadn't seen his brothers since shortly after they'd been turned, but he'd heard there'd been a skirmish between them with natural-born vampires. Though he and Murdoch hadn't expected to find their brothers here, they had hoped that the two might be in dungeons in the castle they strategically needed to take, perhaps the next Horde stronghold. Roth nodded, though he doubted it. He sensed his youngest brother Bastian was dead, and suspected the mind of the oldest one, Conrad, was unreached. Even if he could be found, the two had not appreciated the eternal life their older brothers had forced on them. Murdoch examined the gouge on his arm, seeming unconcerned with his blow, but then he generally seemed unconcerned about everything. Though they shared similar looks, he and Roth couldn't be more different in personality. Roth believed in Christoph's cause, seeing many parallels to his own past, and wanting to continue to fight. Murdoch didn't particularly care. Roth suspected his brother fought only as a favor to him, or because they had nothing else now. Roth found a being in a dungeon, Murdoch said. She seems to have extensive knowledge of the lore. What kind of being? Christoph asked. Roth answered, I have no idea. She appears fey, delicate with simple pointed ears, but she has these small fangs and fingernails, were more like claws. She's not a vampire. Christoph frowned at that. Perhaps she's born of one species. Perhaps. More speculation. Roth was sick of it. He wanted to know the rules of the game so he could dominate it. Find out everything you can from her. She won't talk. I've interrogated enough to know that she'll hint, but never truly divulge. And she hates vampires. Christoph pinched his forehead. Then tomorrow night, if we haven't got information for the rest of the prisoners, we treat her as the Horde she hates would. Torture her for the information if we can't get it out of her any other way. Roth nodded, but in the idea sat with him was ill. As a human, he'd been merciless to his enemies, but he'd never tortured a woman. She wasn't truly a woman, he reminded himself. She was a female among the lore, and their army survival would depend on the knowledge she held. Perhaps he'd never touched a woman because he never needed to. The creature had been right. Roth thought as a guard showed up in his new chambers, he was going to call her up to him. To do with her, he didn't know. So, yeah, that's it, guys. Tomorrow we lead into the exciting chapter 2, as into what Roth would do with her, for he didn't know. Well, thank you guys for listening. Remember to subscribe and leave a comment, like, and I'll see you tomorrow. Ta-ta.